Hello, Miss Shirley. How are you, darling? My day was pretty good. Not bad. I had to be lazy today. I did have to work, but it wasn't that bad. Not bad. Are you ready for tonight's read? Yes. Oh. I can't decide if I want to cut my hair back off or let it grow out. Right now, I'm just being lazy with it. You know, my little curly cues, and the longer it gets, the curlier it gets. It's crazy. Where everybody's at? Oh, again. Wow. Summer short hair. Well, the problem is I go short and then I don't want to go long again. And I've already got a good start on it being long. And when it's short, I have to go every month to get it cut. And the cut that I really want um it would take like every 2 weeks to be cut. All right, Vincey's going to be running a little bit late. She had a family emergency, so she's having to take care of her nieces. So she's trying to get them fed. Hello, who else is on here with me and Miss Shirley? Jackie has made me a new banner for my YouTube, and it's not fitting. And Jackie's on her way. Um, Let me look. Let me see if your smut is ready. June. Yes. He will be next Wednesday. Michael James is next Wednesday. Trying to see who I did next month. Some good ones coming up next month. It's also the July 1st, just so you know. I have no idea. I don't know at this point. I think you and I are going to be the only ones here for a while. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, we'll just enjoy it by ourselves. Okay, so this one is called The Fae King's Solstice. Yeah. And it's book 2 in the Solstice series. So, chapter 1. And imagine this in a dreamscape, because that's what this is a dream or memory or something like that. So, and it's Cassia's point of view. Cassia, wake up. Hurry. They're coming. My mom whispered urgently in my ear. Take your sister and run now. What are you talking about? Run where? I asked. To Yorick. He'll know what to do. Just go, quickly, she pleaded. Mom kissed my forehead and hurried from the room, stopping to press a kiss to Gwen's forehead as well. Flashes of light erupted outside and cries of anger rang through the night. I leapt out of bed and threw on some shoes. I shook Gwen, covering her mouth with my hand to stop her from crying. Shh, you have to be quiet. Bad people are outside. We have to hide, I whispered. My sister nodded her head, and I slowly pulled my hand back. Get your shoes on. I handed Gwen a jacket and shrugged mine on before throwing my backpack over my shoulders. I helped my sister into hers and closed my eyes. I channeled Mother Earth and asked for her help and guidance. A cooling sensation rained down on us, and I knew my concealment spell had worked. Mom and Dad had been working with me for weeks on a cloaking spell that would cover both Gwen and me. Holding Gwen's hand, I led us through the house until we reached the pantry. Hidden at the back behind the paper towels was a small door that led to a tunnel. My father had added it the year after Gwen was born. I ducked my head as we walked as fast as we could until we reached the end of the tunnel. A ladder went straight up, disappearing into the darkness. I knew what was up there, an abandoned barn about half a mile from the house. I held on to the ladder for dear life as I listened for any sign someone might be in the barn. Satisfied we hadn't been caught, I pushed the trap door open and climbed out. My sister stepped out behind me and helped me to quietly shut the door. Outside, the night sky was lit up with the dancing flames. Our house, Gwen whispered. Her hand gripped mine so tight I thought she was going to break something. I want Mom and Dad. Me too, kiddo, but we have to keep going. We can't stop here. I tugged at her hand until she fell in step beside me. We walked only a few feet when I heard a man's voice call out, Find those brats. They can't have gotten far. We end this tonight. His cry was echoed by at least a dozen others as they called for our deaths. Flashlights fanned out in all directions, but we were frozen in place as one landed on my mother's body. She lay crumpled on the ground, my father at her head. A tall man with dark hair stepped into the light and toted her body, chuckling. Sound carried at night, and I would never forget that laugh. I jerked at Gwen's hand, and we took off at a run. Urich's house was at least 10 miles away, and the faster we got there, the better. All night we alternated between running and walking until we couldn't go any further. Gwen pointed out an old house across the field we were passing through. Daylight was fast approaching, and we needed somewhere to hide and rest. Deciding to take the chance, we crossed the field, making sure we wouldn't be seen. My cloaking spell was only so good. Anyone looking might not have seen the two of us, but they definitely see the wheat moving as we pushed it out of the way. The house was furnished but empty. No cars in the driveway, and from the looks of the things, no alarm system either. I dropped the cloaking spell and checked for anyone who could be hiding. Satisfied we were alone, I headed for the back door. Unlocked. Hey, Vincy. Gwen and I hurried inside and raided the kitchen for food. 2 ham and cheese sandwiches each with a tall glass of milk filled us up. Apologizing for stealing, I took fresh fruit and snacks and stuffed them in our backpacks. Gwen and I each grabbed a blanket and headed for the barn out back. I didn't want to be caught in someone's house with nowhere to hide if they came home. The barn was huge inside, with tractors and farm equipment all over the downstairs. The loft area was filled with boxes of junk and made it the perfect place to hide and catch up on sleep. Gwen fell asleep as soon as her head hit her backpack. I slept fitfully that day, waking up at every sound, wondering if we'd been found. The sound of Gwen whimpering in her sleep ended all thoughts of me getting any sleep. I curled around my sister, holding her tight until her breathing calmed and she relaxed. I had no idea what we were going to do. It took us 4 days to get to Urich's house. The sun had just set when we crept onto the property. I heard raised voices and we stopped at the tree line waiting to see who it was. Rhys, Urich's brother and our coven's leader. My mother and father had hated him, and when he took over, they stepped back from their roles as trainers. Uric understood, but Rhys had called them traitors. My mind spun in 1,000 different directions until Uric called out to us.
Cassia, tell us that's you, kiddo. Please, tell me it's you and Gwen.
Uric said.
He's gone. You're safe, kiddo.
I pulled Gwen from our hiding spot and dropped my cloaking spell. Uric immediately fell to his knees and his arms wrapped around both of us as we cried. Eventually, we made our way inside where Uric sat Gwen in front of the television and took me in the dining room.
Tell me everything, he demanded.
I recounted everything I could remember, from Mom waking me up to seeing my parents' bodies to hearing the tall man's laughter. Uric was disappointed I didn't get a better look at him, but relieved we were okay. He and my dad had been friends forever, it seemed like, and throughout my story he struggled to hold on to his emotions.
I promise you, Cassia, we will keep you and Gwen safe. I will find your I will find who killed your parents. I swear it.
Uric promised me. I knew he would. Without a single doubt, I knew he would do whatever it was in his power to bring those people to justice. I woke with a start, my heart racing from the nightmare. I should have never told anyone about that stupid prediction. Maybe if I hadn't, I wouldn't have missed my sister's 18th birthday. I wouldn't have had to go on the run in fucking South America to avoid the most annoying fate ever. Just thinking about Oliver made my blood boil. I knew he was doing his job, but I still wanted to wring his neck. Even after hearing why I couldn't be his king's mate, he still insisted on telling the man. Loris Kelsaler was hands down the hottest man I'd ever met. His long silvery blue hair and shimmering skin stretched taut over muscles earned from years of combat training. His eyes were the most intense green I'd ever seen. Everything about him screamed, "Fuck me," and there was nothing I wanted to do more than just that. Instead, I hid myself in Ecuador, training under the world's most powerful earth witch. Raul Zambrano was a small man, his back hunched with age and wrinkles lining his face. His looks were deceiving. That man could have you on your ass in under 2 seconds if he wanted to. And in the last month, he had put me in my place more than once. Come on, child. There is much to learn today, Raoul called from the kitchen. I dressed quickly and hurried to help prepare breakfast. I had daily duties to perform in payment for him taking me on as a student. He knew who I was the second he opened the door and greeted me. He had a vision telling him to prepare for my arrival. He invited me in, and we'd begun lessons the same day. I'd learned more than I ever expected to while training under him. Raoul's name meant Wolf Council, and it was no surprise to me he'd been called on more than once to help settle debates between witches and shifters alike. The lesson we'd recently started was conjuring fire to use as a weapon. A small pond was nestled in the middle of a meadow behind his house, and that's where I stood to practice. Any failures would be drowned out by the water without risking the surrounding forest. An hour after waking, I stood in the freezing water up to my waist and conjured flames over and over again. Each time they flared brightly and fizzled out before I could do anything with them. Raoul was patient and kind, but I could tell he was frustrated with me. Fire is your weakness. You're scared, he stated. I'm not scared, just cautious. I crossed my arms over my chest and glared at the man sunning himself beside the water. Without looking up, he raised a hand and shot a fireball at me. I jumped backwards and landed on my ass in the pond. I came up sputtering and spitting. What the fuck was that? Fear, he sat up and stared me down. What have I taught you? Magic fire cannot hurt someone without the user intending it to. It will pass right through, I huffed. And yet you still jump. Try again. This time hit me with your flames, he instructed. He rose from his seat and faced me down. I held my hand up and concentrated on creating a ball of flames. I nearly jumped again when the fireball leaped from my hand and floated above my hand. I could feel the warmth, but it didn't burn me. Looking across at Raoul, I sent the flames hurtling towards him. They passed through and fizzled out behind him again. Behind him. Excellent. Again. We spent hours that day, mostly with me freezing my ass off and throwing flames at my teacher. Only when he was satisfied did he let me get out of the water and dry off. I joined him on the banks and laid on a blanket, enjoying the sun's warmth. Tomorrow we will create weapons with your fire. The trials will test every single ability you possess. Failure is not an option, so we must ensure that does not happen. Read the last 2 chapters in the book I gave you and commit it to memory. The solstice is coming faster than you think, Raoul warned me. We will also work on calling the flames back to you if you miss your target. We spent the next 3 weeks mastering those skills until Raoul was certain I could take on any opponent. What he planned after that shocked the hell out of me. You want me to do what? I asked. Read this book on Fae history. Knowledge is key to winning, and you cannot defeat a Fae if you do not understand them, he sighed. I'm not trying to defeat them. I'm trying to survive, I stated. He shook his head. Same thing. Knowledge is power. You will read before breakfast every morning and after dinner every night. During the day, you will practice with human weapons until you master them. Does it sound okay, Vincy? I mean, does it sound like a little wiry old man? I'm kind of picturing, oh, Poot. What's his name on um um Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? That's kind of who I have in my head. The not the turtles, but their master. What is his name? Dang it. He shook his head. Same thing. Knowledge is power. You will read before breakfast every morning and after dinner every night. During the day, you will practice with human weapons until you master them. Sure as shit, my last weeks there were spent reading, shooting, and sword fighting. I was a damn good shot with both handguns and rifles, but sword fighting was not my forte. Spinner. Yes, I knew it started with an S. I just couldn't remember what it was. Spinner. That's kind of who I'm, but I'm not even good at it. Anyway, um, Raoul brought in his great nephew to teach me the skills that he could not. We started with wooden sticks, and I swore his nephew, Leandro, took great pride in smacking me on the ass with them. The day Raoul declared me ready was my greatest achievement. In a moment of frustration, I set my sword aflame and attacked Leandro with a vengeance I had known I had. Only when he was flat on his back with my sword posed above him did I relent. On my last night in Ecuador, Raoul took me to dinner in a nearby town. We sat and ate until we were fit to burst. I was obsessed with the arroz con pollo, with their little fried potato pancakes. I wasn't usually much for alcohol, but the local fruit juices were divine. As we sat at our table, I watched the people milling about the small streets. Locals and tourists alike wandered about, stopping in and picking up a small sample or two before heading back out. The city center wasn't a huge, thriving metropolis, more a fountain where small groups of musicians played together and people danced under strings of lights. Are you scared? Raoul asked, drawing me out of my head. I'd be a fool if I wasn't at least a bit apprehensive. There's a lot riding on my success or failure, I shrugged. Too scared to try? He asked. I turned to face him, a smile on my face. I was before. Now I know I cannot allow my fear to control me. Then you are ready. He reached out and patted my hand. Tomorrow you will move to a place here in town to prepare for your return. A good mattress and a hot shower will do you wonders. I laughed and nodded my head. Sleeping on corn husk and showering in cold water had been the worst part of my journey. Thank you for everything you've done for me. Not just for you. I'm too old to fight in a supernatural war, he chuckled. Then I'll have to make sure you don't have to, even if it kills me. Chapter 2, Loris. And I'm saying this is Loris. His name is spelled Lhoris. So I'm not really sure. Kind of sounds better than Horace, which would probably be my name. Your Majesty. Oh, Oliver. Let's see. Your Majesty, please. This is of the utmost importance, Oliver whispered. I tried to wave I tried to wave him off once again, but he slammed his hand down on the table. Damn it, Loris, this cannot wait. I slowly turned my head to look my guard in the eye. When he stared right back at me, I knew he wasn't in a joking mood. Oliver had never been one to overstep his bounds, but slamming his hand on my table was damn close. Everyone out, I demanded. I saw Sothra step closer and waved for her to go as well. Are you certain, Your Grace? She commanded. Out, Sothra, now, I commanded. She bowed her head and backed away, giving Oliver a glare that could have wilted stone flowers. Explain yourself. I attended the meeting as you requested. Nothing new to report there. However, The witch was there. Cassia. He paused and glanced round the room. You know she is descended from Morgan Le Fay's line. Morgan was known for her visions and premonitions. She had a book of them, one that is in Cassia's possession. One of the predictions states that a witch of her line will be the mate of one not of their world. Obviously, this is referring to the Fae. We are the only supernatural race that does not live full time in the mortal realm. Is there a point to this story? I asked. Oliver narrowed his eyes but continued. Cassia is your mate. And you gathered this how? I asked, one eyebrow arched at his tone. I I read the prediction, and Cassia had a vision. She glanced about the room again before leaning closer. She ran from me, Your Majesty, escaped before I could bring her here. I questioned her, and I believe she is telling the truth. I sat back in my chair and considered the implications of what he was saying. If Cassia was indeed my mate, my already unruly kingdom would be thrown into utter chaos. Peace between the witches and Fae was still new and fragile. The Fae could revolt at the thought of a witch as queen. We'd been on the brink of war for far too long. As much as I wanted a mate, and she would make a fine one, I wasn't sure I could risk it. Who else knows? Who else knows? I asked. The wolves know, and the bear as well, he replied. His voice was filled with disgust as he practically spat out the word bear. You have a problem with the bear shifter? I believe he is hiding the witch from me, Oliver admitted. I eyed my guard, admittedly one of my closest companions over the last 100 or so years, and considered what he was saying. Oliver did not make light of anything. He'd nearly taken his own life after Ava had been killed in the arena. For him to come to me with that kind of news had me reconsidering my reaction and thoughts. You're absolutely positive she's telling the truth, I asked. I am, he gave a sharp nod. Then find her. Find her and bring her to me, I commanded. Do you wish to know the prophecy? He asked. I nodded. A day will come whence the realms will connect. A witch descended from my line will mate with one not of this realm. She will have the power to bring about times of greatness and times of great darkness. Their joining shall be the beginning of the end of times, the end of peace. Once the prophecy begins at the meeting of the maids on the Solstice, only the passing of challenges far greater than she could imagine shall stop the end from beginning. Failure will mean the end of this world as we know it. Morgan didn't play around with that one, did she? I chuckled. Well, fuck. You aren't pleased? The beginning of the end of times? Would you be pleased? I raised an eyebrow. No, I suppose not, Oliver conceded. Do you still wish for me to find her and bring her back? No, wait, yes. Shit, I muttered. I leaned my elbows on the table and rubbed my temples. I had too much going on to add another thing to my plate. But Oliver was right. That prophecy and what it meant was too damn important. Just find her and keep an eye on her. Don't try to bring her back just yet. That witch is smart and cunning. If she's hiding, then she's got a damn good reason. Oliver gave a nod and turned to walk away. I called out to him as soon as he reached the door. Hey, Jackie Lou Who. Oliver, he looked back at me. This stays between us for obvious reasons. Yes, of course, Your Majesty. Oliver gave a slight bow. And one more thing. He paused with his hand hovering over the doorknob. If you ever
Call me by my given name in front of the council again. I'll toss your ass on the arena. I'll toss your ass in the arena until I think you've learned your lesson. Clear? Yes, Your Majesty. Just be prepared to find new guards. Oliver smirked. I shook my head and laughed. The fucker was cocky, but he knew damn good and well, I could pit him against nearly all of my guards at the same time, and he'd still come out on top. I only hoped that he was prepared to step up when I made him Cassia's guard, if what they claimed was true. There was no denying a connection existed between the two of us. If it hadn't, I never would have carried her through Jabrel's forest, especially when someone else could have done it. The mere thought of someone else touching her had my blood boiling. I stood from my chair and left the meeting hall. I was done for the day, regardless of what the council wanted. Those old fucks loved to hear themselves talk, and that was the last thing I needed. Instead, I slipped out the back, chuckling when I saw Taryn waiting for me. He was the leader of my guards, the head captain, the longest standing member of the King's Guard, and my closest confidant. Sneaking out again? He smirked. You know me well, old friend, I shrugged. Where to tonight? Horses or more discreet? He asked. A bit more discreet tonight, I'm afraid. I need a stiff drink or two to help forget about this whole evening, I sighed. I know just the place. Follow me, Your Majesty. Taryn led me out of the rear of the palace and through the narrow back alleys of the city. Iberroth at night was just as gorgeous as it was during the day. A small sign atop a wooden door read the Ivory Vales. It was in a part of the city I rarely went. Most of my guards claimed it was unsafe. For Taryn to take me there alone at night had me wondering what the hell he was thinking. I followed Taryn through the door and blinked through the thick smoke inside. Once it cleared, I could see the room in front of me. Low tables and chairs filled the space. Patrons were scattered around the room, some smoking with hookahs, while others enjoyed all manners of strangely colored drinks. Come on back through here, Taryn said, waving me forward. We wove our way through the crowded room to a curtain made of thick ivory-colored velvet. Taryn brushed it aside and gestured to the dark room ahead. Welcome to the Ivory Vales, Your Majesty, he whispered. He led me to a corner booth filled with oversized floor pillows designed for lounging and relaxing. We took our seats and Taryn placed our order with a strangely dressed woman. She whisked away as if floating on a cloud and returned with our drinks faster than I thought possible. Taryn poured 2 glasses from one of the carafes and handed me one. To discreetness, he smirked. The drink burned as it went down, and smoke curled around my head as it shot out of my nose. Taryn laughed and refilled the cups. The second drink went down easier, but the smoke was something I'd have to get used to. What the fuck is that? I asked. Dragon's breath, my sister's creation, he laughed. She owns this place. Bought it from the previous owner and cleaned it up. It used to be a brothel. Still would be if it weren't for my big brother. A tall redhead with killer curves plopped down next to Taryn and laughed as he hugged her tight. Missed you? I suppose this one keeps you busy. She jerked a thumb in my direction and Taryn sputtered and coughed up his drink. He is the king, you know, Taryn whispered. Show some respect. He ain't coming in here for respect. We all knows that. He ain't coming here for respect. We all knows it. He's coming here for cheap drinks and to be left the fuck alone, she shrugged. I couldn't argue with a single thing she said. Name's Loris and this drink is killer. What's in it? She regarded me for a few moments before answering. Tilly, it's the house specialty, and trust me when I tell you that you don't want to know. Taryn and I cracked up laughing. Tilly dragon's breath, and the ivory veils was exactly what I needed. The drinks kept flowing, and food eventually made its way to our table. We spent the night laughing, talking, and getting completely shit faced. Taryn and I were so drunk till he had to help carry us upstairs to the old brothel rooms to sleep it off. When I woke the next morning, my head felt like someone had a clamp around it, and my breath smelled like something that came out of the wrong end of the dragon. The lumpy mattress beneath me squeaked and groaned as I rolled to the side and attempted to sit up. I just made it upright when the door flew open and Sothra stormed in, sword at the ready. "Your Grace," she damn near shouted, "are you injured?" "Sothra," I whispered, gesturing for her to come closer. As soon as she was in range, I grasped the front of her shirt in my hand and jerked her down to my level. "If you yell again in my presence, I'll have you beheaded. I am not injured. I am hungover. Shut the fuck up." Sathra's wide eyes grew even wider at my words, and she fell back on her ass when I released her. "Told you he was fine. Drink that glass beside your bed and you'll feel brand new," Taryn told me. Trusting he wouldn't do me wrong 2 days in a row, I picked up the glass and downed it in one go. The taste was absolutely vile, but as soon as it hit my stomach, I felt better than I had in years. "What the fuck was that?" I asked Taryn. "Butterbomb, another of Tilly's creations. Has butterscotch schnapps and a whole host of other ingredients, half of which she gets from the palace apothecary." He shrugged. "Tilly is a genius, and her talents are wasted here," I told him. "I'll be sure to let her know," he chuckled. "Now let's get out of here before someone sees you. Last thing you need is the council getting word you spent the night in an old brothel." "Oh, fuck," I muttered. Fortunately, Sothra and the others had worn regular clothes when they arrived, and I was able to borrow a cloak to cover myself. The walk back to the palace was uneventful, but the chaos inside was unexpected. Men and women were running about, screaming about an invasion, while guards stood there looking confused. "Silence!" My voice echoed through the main hall, bringing everyone to a standstill. "What the fuck is going on?" "Your Majesty, our kingdom is under attack," a council member stated. "How so?" I asked. "Your brother's forces," he began, only to stop when I stepped forward. "My brother is dead. End of discussion. The only forces left are misguided Fae. If they fight against us, they will die. I will not tolerate this sort of reaction and blind panic. We are stronger than ever, and we will act like it. Do I make myself clear?" I snapped. As one, the council members and guards bowed before me and stated, "Yes, Your Majesty." "Everyone clear out. Return to your chambers and remain there until further notice. Members of the guard will resume their positions until instructed otherwise. Captains, follow me," I ordered. I hurried through the palace to the central control room. If there was any bit of truth to the claims of an attack, the Fae work in the control room would know. Our security systems were state of the art, far more advanced than anything humans had ever created. Here, a Fae could be tracked with the with the even with even the tiniest bit of information about them. "Rubius, what do you have?" I asked the head operator. "The traders have been spotted gathering in the outlying areas. They could be here in an instant with portals. If they travel normally, 3 hours tops. Current guess is at least 500, Rubius stated. 500? How certain are you of that number?" Taryn demanded. "Enough to bet your sister on," Rubius muttered. Bet my sister on anything, and she'll hang your dick from ceiling as decoration. Taryn glared at him. I ushered Taryn into the room and shut the door behind us. Be real here, Rubius. How big of a threat is this? You you need to lock the city down now, enact the codes, and set the barriers. I believe they will attack within the next few hours, he admitted. Fuck. I ran my hands through my hair, yanking tangles out of the way. One glance at Taryn had me nodding my head. Do it now. I want those barriers up in the next 15 minutes, preferably sooner. Chapter 3, Cassia. My apartment was exactly how I'd left it all those months ago. It seemed like a lifetime, and really it was. The Cassia that walked out of that door was not the same one that walked back in. The old Cassia was naive and foolish. The new one was jaded and absolutely terrified. I packed the rest of my books and clothes, tapped the last box shut, and yanked and sank into my favorite chair. It was deep purple velvet wingback that was it was a deep purple velvet wingbat that was large enough to fit two people comfortably in. I'd packed it up for free. I'd picked it up for free in a buy nothing group online. It had been a god awful yellow and orange when I got it, and I promptly recovered it. As I looked around the room, I remembered all the good times that Gwen and I had watching movies and chatting about silly things. My heart clenched as I thought of my sister and all the broken promises. I swore an oath when we lost our parents that I would never leave her, and I'd done just that over the last year, more than once. A knock on the door was the only warning I got before Yurik barged in. You don't have to do this, he said. The coven can and will protect you. I smiled at the man I'd called my friend and mentor for many years. The same coven that voted me out? Merely a formality. He waved me off. I shook my head. It wasn't, and you know it. How's Hannah? She's fine. Don't do this, Cassia. Please. He pleaded with me. I have to. You know that better than anyone. I cannot run from her premonition. They always come true, and I've been prolonging the inevitable. I'm tired of running, tired of fighting fate, I said. I sighed. Fate could always be changed, you know that, he reminded me. He was right, but I wasn't sure I wanted to change mine. How is Hannah, really? I asked. I needed to change the subject, and Yurik seemed to sense that since he left me. Now remember, this is book 2, so some of this that may not make sense that happened in the past would be in book 1. No change. She's still hidden in the spare room, refuses to let anyone other than my mother in, refuses to go to therapy. She screams in her sleep, this god-forsaken sound that rips my soul to pieces. I don't know what to do, he muttered. Yurik took a seat on the edge of my bed and leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. I cannot give her what she needs. She needs her other. You've given her time, Yurik. Now it's time to give her what she actually needs. You, I stated. He shook his head and held up a hand. Hear me out. Oh, I mean, he shook his head and I held up my hand. Hear me out. You've done everything that they've told you. Well, they are idiots. You two are two halves of the same soul. You cannot be complete without your other half. Hence, why she is your other. The reason she lets her mother in is because she feels the familial connection. She needs you whether she realizes it or not. Be there for her. Next time she has a nightmare, go in and hold her. Nothing else. Repeat until she's comfortable with you and seeks out your presence. We have no clue what the poor girl went through other than she did not have any signs of sexual trauma. For some, the mere threat of such violence would be enough to traumatize them for life. Be the positive that she needs. You're excited and looked over at me. When did you become this? Learned it from this weird guy that was friends with my dad, I shrugged. Are you sure I can't talk you out of this? He asked. I'm sure, I chuckled. Then knock 'em dead, kiddo. He rose from the bed and from pulled from my chair, wrapping his arms around me. I love you and Gwen like you two were my own kids. We love you too. Now get out of here before you make me cry. I shoved my back as we both laughed. I'll be fine, swear it. He held out his pinky and I wrapped mine around it. We shook once and he gave me a quick nod before stalking out the front door. Uric had never been one for overt displays of emotions, instead preferring to make light of a situation if possible. Satisfied that I'd done everything I could, I wrapped the cloak around my shoulders and stepped outside. I locked the door and glanced around to make sure the area was clear. I opened a portal and stepped through it, coming out in Marcus and Summer's kitchen. I could hear the two of them moving around upstairs. I pulled my cloak off and threw it over the back of a chair and hopped up on the counter to wait for them. I pulled my phone out and sent a text to Travis letting him know I was back. He'd agreed to be a contact between Oliver and I as the Fae searched for me. I had a feeling that Oliver had known where I was and was kind enough to give me time to prepare for what was to come. Marcus was the first one downstairs and came to a stop when he saw me. Dang these male voices. Hey, you're back. I am. It's the solstice after all. I have a feeling many things are going to change today, I sighed. Like? He asked. Too much to list before coffee. May I? I gestured to the pot. Cream or sugar? Marcus pulled 2 mugs down. Tiny splash of cream and 1 sugar, please. Marcus fixed our coffees and handed one to me. I wrapped my palms around the steaming mug and took a deep breath in before taking a small sip. You look different, he stated. You being tired? I chuckled. No, I mean something's different about you, he insisted. I had time to do a lot of thinking, and I guess you could say I'm more resolved to my fate. I shrugged. I did a lot of studying to help prepare me for what's to come. You mean the trials? Gwen asked, walking into the kitchen and throwing her arms around my waist. You missed my birthday, asshole. I know, I'm sorry. Did you get my gift? I asked. I leaned my head on top of hers and breathed in her familiar smell. I did, but Marcus won't let me keep it in the house. Gwen shot him a glare and shrugged. She's fine, though. Travis has been keeping her for me. I swear she likes him better than she does me. Don't worry, she's your familiar. There's no way she could possibly like someone else more than you. Especially not a grumpy old bear. I laughed. When Summer came downstairs, she and I both squealed like little girls, hugging and crying. How's the baby? I asked, rubbing my hand on Summer's tiny baby bump. I had an appointment yesterday. All is well, Summer grinned. Summer paused and tilted her head to the side as she stared at me. You look different. I groaned as Marcus laughed. I said the same thing. He wrapped an arm around his mate and pulled her closer. Summer sniffed once and pulled away, stepping towards me. She stopped right in front of me and inhaled. Your power is stronger. Way stronger. What did you do? Summer asked. She stepped back into her mate's arms and waited. Gaining power as a witch is different than for other supernaturals. I studied and practiced. I spent the last 2 months training with a warlock in Ecuador. He lives down near on the equator, and there's no more powerful spot for no powerful. Blah, blah, blah. He lives down near on the equator, and there's no more powerful spot for an earth witch than the center of the world. I shrugged. Well, I'm glad you're back, Summer replied. Have you told Oliver? No, I texted Travis to let him know. I'm sure he's told the persistent Faye by now. I leaned back against the counter. Marcus's phone dinged, indicating an incoming message. He looked down and told everyone what it was. Travis and Oliver and Loris have arrived at his place. Travis said Oliver and Loris have arrived at his place. He wanted to be able to give you fair warning, so he told Oliver you were at his place. They'll be here soon. He's driving them over. And so it begins, I sighed. I set my cup down on the counter and brushed my hands down my shirt, smoothing the material. Standing up, I squared my shoulders and walked into the living room. Gwen stepped up next to me, entwining her fingers with mine. With one small squeeze, she grounded and centered me. My heart still raced in my chest, but I no longer felt the need to flee. Travis's truck came to a stop and the doors opened. I saw Travis step out and felt Gwen's sharp intake of breath, but my eyes were firmly glued to my other. Loris was a fucking force of nature when he stepped out of the truck. The faking seemed to have grown even larger as he rose to his full height. There were muscles on top of muscles, all bunched up and ready for anything. His long hair was shorn off, and he had grown a beard that made his handsome face look even more rugged. His face was a mask of neutrality until he saw Marcus and Summer. Then the anger became apparent. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Inside. Calm down and I'll call her out," Marcus replied before looking towards Travis. "What the fuck is wrong with you, bro? Do you smell that? Like vanilla and something earthier? Something wild?" He continued smelling the air and took a step towards the house. Loris was instantly in front of the distracted bear, his shirt bunched in the Fae's hand. "One more step and I'll kill you myself." Gwen wrenched her hand from mine with a shriek of fury, and the front door nearly blew off its hinges as she raced for the front porch. She launched herself off the top step at the Fae King's back. Travis shoved Loris to the side and caught Gwen in his arms. The two froze as they held each other. "Well, I'll be damned. I did not see that coming," Marcus muttered. "What the actual fuck is going on?" Oliver asked. "They're mates," Summer replied. "Well, color me fucking shocked." "Fascinating," Loris grumbled. "Where is she?" "I'm right here. No need to be rude, Your Majesty." I stepped out onto the porch. My hair caught in the wind that had suddenly picked up, swirling about my face. I slowly walked to the edge of the porch, my eyes never leaving Loris's. He was there, hand held out as I stepped down onto the first step. I ignored it until I stopped on the second step. I lifted my hand and it hovered above his as I looked up at him. "Are you sure? Absolutely fucking positive that this is what you want? I won't risk everything for you to change your mind in a few months," I whispered. "Funny. I'd risk the entire universe for 5 minutes." His hand reached up, wrapped around my hair, and he jerked me into him. The kiss was nothing short of magic. Pun fucking intended. His mouth devoured me as if I was the only thing that could keep him alive. When he finally broke apart, I could only stand there and stare up at him. "Now what?" I asked. "Now we talk, then we go home," Loris stated. His grip tightened when I tensed. "Perhaps you'd like to come inside and talk?" No, I don't want to intrude," I declined. I glanced up at Loris and took in the tightness of his jaw. He was holding himself back and far too close to be snapping. "I'd like to speak with Travis and Gwen before leaving. It won't take long. Then we can return to my apartment to talk. I have a few things there I'd like to take with me." As soon as the words were out of my mouth, he relaxed. His bruising grip eased and he nodded. Loris refused to release me completely as I thanked Marcus and Summer, promising to come visit as soon as I was able to. Summer cried and Marcus hustled her inside with a threat to come find me if I didn't. We piled into Travis's truck, Oliver driving as the bear refused to release my sister. The drive back was awkward for everyone. The second we came to a stop, we rushed from the vehicle as if the hounds of hell were upon us. Oberon, Travis's clan chief and father, was waiting for us. His eyes lit up as he saw his son holding my sister.
Tell me now, son. His voice boomed through the surrounding woods, bringing the animals around us to a halt. She is my mate, father. Travis stood proudly before his father, Gwen's tiny hand swallowed by his larger one. I stood behind them, Loris close to my side, and Oliver just behind us. I fought back tears as Gwen looked up at her bear with eyes glowing with unshed tears and happiness. My sister had never looked more beautiful than in that moment. Oberon grinned, his smile stretching ear to ear. He took the stairs two at a time as he reached for his son. He clapped Travis so hard on the back it would have knocked me for a loop. Travis just hugged his dad back, never letting go of Gwen. When Oberon stepped back, his eyes filled with tears. He reached for Gwen and hugged her as gently as he could. Even so, Gwen grunted, and the two bears laughed. Don't worry, girlie. We'll toughen you up here,
Oberon boasted.
Inside, come on, all of you. Let's get inside and I'll call your mom.
We hurried in behind the others and stood by the fireplace as Oberon made calls, and Travis brought Aerith out from her hiding place. Gwen's familiar curled up in her lap, relishing the attention she was receiving. Each time she glanced our way, though, she hissed. Apparently, she didn't like Faye. When I mentioned it, Oliver confirmed my suspicion.
She usually goes straight for the ankles, no hissing until she's been shooed off at least twice, he grimaced.
He pulled up his pant leg, and angry red scratches appeared from under the fabric.
Smart girl, I muttered.
Alrighty, they got you through 3 chapters. Man, that went quick. I just kind of got lost in it and was just reading it. And then the next thing I know, there's the time. So, all right, folks. Okay, at first, Miss Shirley, I thought that was a baby bottle instead of a candle. I got it now. Okay. So, my suggestion would be to go read book 1 and then read book 2. So, but it's book 1 is anything like book 2, it's going to be worth it. All right. So, you guys have a wonderful weekend. Those of us that have an extended long weekend, have a good one. And I will see you guys here next Tuesday night to read June Grandma's Silent Auction by Mr. Michael James. Whoop, whoop. Alrighty, y'all. Have a good evening and a good weekend. And I will see you guys next week. Happy reading.